All week we've been, in essence, talking about delivery. When we were talking about ethos, we were talking about how your style and your delivery merge to form this particular persona you carry into your speech. Now, here at the end of week 6, I wanted to devote a little bit more time merely to the mechanics of delivery. Specifically, I want to talk in this video lecture about pauses, vocal variety, and movement. And we talked a little bit about this in the impromptu, but now we get to elaborate on it. We get to enrich our discussion of these vital parts of speech delivery. So let's start off by talking a little bit about pausing. So just before you watch this clip, hopefully you watched that embedded YouTube videos, and one of those videos was this newsman, and he's reading a story and he doesn't put an essential pause in there. He says, Dana is off tonight, he was murdered and then set on fire. That's not at all what he meant, right? That wasn't a single phrase. Those were two vitally different phrases. Dana is off tonight, important pause. Then we've got he was murdered, and they're starting off with the lead story about someone who was murdered. But when that newsman doesn't have that pause there, we read that, we hear that, we understand that as a single phrase. And I like starting with this example merely to point out that pausing makes a difference. It can shape meaning. It also sort of highlights in that clip some of the dangers for oral discourse as opposed to written of starting with a subordinate clause, where maybe we read that as the second component of what you just said. So pauses can be tremendously important in terms of shaping your meaning and also in terms of helping the audience understand and access your material. Okay? So one of the things that you can be thinking about is pauses allow material to sink in. Right? They give us time as audience members to process your information. Now, this is a type of pause that you can be practicing with. So, sometimes pauses may not be the thing that is easiest to practice or easiest to think about. But certainly, if you know that there are going to be a couple of key phrases in your performance, in your speech, that you really want the audience to pay attention to, well, there you can start practicing. You can start planning those pauses. So without a doubt, after big ideas, after key ideas, maybe a pause before and after that. I think a pause before and after any type of preview, either the main introductory preview or internal previews, helps set apart that information so that we can process it a little bit better. So be thinking about, as you're going through, as you're practicing your speech, maybe even marking up your outline or your manuscript in terms of where you're going to want those pauses to be. Well, one place you want to know where you're going to put a pause in is asking yourself the question, do I need to highlight this information? Do I need the audience to have time to process what was just said? So you want to use pauses to allow material to sink in. But you can also be using pauses to emphasize an idea. Earlier this week, we analyzed Neil deGrasse Tyson and looked at specifically his informative ethos. He uses pauses all the time to emphasize an idea, to really hammer home a key thought, to suggest that one particular aspect is very important. Kind of how he would do it, right? So that sort of emphasis pause can also be planned. If you know you're going to build to a point and hit a key concept, a pause afterwards is like underlining it heavily, if you're writing or if you're taking notes in a text. So you can plan those pauses ahead of time. So certainly you don't want to go too fast, but my key concern is pauses can help the audience follow along. One, they can help us process material, but also they can help us understand the hierarchy of ideas, the priority that you're giving to one idea over another, simply by virtue of a pause before and or after a key concept. Okay, so that's pauses. That would also add to variety in your speech performance. So if someone's speaking along and they never have a pause, that's going to be problematic. So we want to certainly have pauses in at various points in our speeches.